Hello, I'm Brad Wheeler, Vice President for Information Technology at Indiana University and Professor of Business. I'm here at USB's Leaders Angle to talk about the business of open source software. It's to talk about how communities can come together to make big software systems cost less and keep our money in our mission. An edited version of my talk follows. So let me tell you just a little bit about what's going on in the United States higher ed public sector. Three pictures here will tell the whole story for the U.S. public sector. The red line is how much students are paying out of their own pocket in tuition or financing in loans that they do have to pay back. That's the cost of education in the U.S. And this is as a percent of budget. Indiana University, we have 8 campuses. We're a $3 billion US operation on an annual basis. And this is the percent the students are paying in the red line, and you see it's been going up over the last 10 years. Why is it going up? Because public investment is going down. That's the blue line of what the state of Indiana provides in support. For management of a $3 billion enterprise, our senior leadership team, we're looking at this. The red line is the actual growth in our state operating appropriation. The blue line is just inflation, the consumer price index, and the green line is the higher education price index. Those factors of the economy that are most relevant to our work: energy, labor cost, health insurance cost. And so you can see that gap continuing to go up. As higher education becomes increasingly a private good, not a public good, students become much more sensitive in price shopping. How long will that degree take? Can I work while I do it and take it online, or do I have to pull out of my life for a year or two? So we have this innovation and efficiency imperative. When universities face a challenge, there's really 3 generic strategies. You know, Michael Porter came up with 4 generic strategies. For universities, we can only come up with 3 for how you deal with these curves. The first one is, it is so deep in our DNA, we can't see straight for thinking about it. That is, think about universities. We are islands and we are independent. The second generic strategy is dependence. So this notion of becoming dependent on somebody else because you think of just your core competencies, this swept through management doctrine through the 1990s and into the 2000s. And interdependence is the third strategy, and one that I'm going to talk to you about for coping with these curves. So these big systems, the systems for running the financial system of the university, for enrolling students, tracking degrees and such, course plans, the human resources system, in some universities, the research administration systems. These are kind of the 4 big elephants, and they consume a lot of money. Because at Indiana University, we had put in 2 pieces. We put in student and the HR of one of the big systems in the late 90s, and all the cool kids were putting in all 3. Put in financial too, that's what everybody was doing. And we had a guy said, you know, I don't think we should do that. And one thing led to another, and we did not do that, and it's part of the story I'm going to tell you. We put in, and we built an open source financial system. So rather than taking $23 million out of the hands of the deans of the schools, you know, the School of Business, the School of Engineering, we put that thing in for less than $6 million. Every $1 million we save is about 100 student scholarships. So as we think about the future, it's often good to understand the past. So 2 guys, Kovacic and Katz, in 2002, they wrote that at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st, higher education has invested, by conservative estimates, $5 billion US in administration systems. One of the reasons that happened is because every campus pursued rabid independence. So the question is there another way? And at the business school, being good academics, well, there is nothing so practical as a good theory. In 2004, after a little wrangling, we decided that we were going to build an open source financial system. Now, there have been some teaching and learning systems done, Sakai or Moodle, if you've ever heard of either of those. And I had one of my colleagues say, If you want to mess with teaching and learning, that's okay, but my God, man, this is a financial system. And, you know, I was just baffled by someone saying that. It's like, are you kidding me? Teaching and learning, every professor is an expert. They all want it done differently. You know, accounting, debits on the left, credits on the right, we're good. You know, there are some rules about how you do this. So we said, you know, let's do this. Well, one thing led to another, and now we are 10 years later with this. And it was named Koala. Koala is the Malaysian word for wok, like a cooking wok, W-O-K. So today the Koala Foundation exists. We built the financial system. We have 8 different projects, 77 members, commercial firms as members, as well as colleges and universities, 28 million in net assets and just under 20 million a year in net turnover. Some people go, well, yeah, but there's a lot of questions. I don't know if you universities, you could never agree, because y'all would just fight about everything. You could never resolve conflicts in what the system should do. Like a big public university, Cornell is one of the Ivy universities. Not the same as a state university like Indiana or others. Could you figure out how to build software? Okay, if you built it, would it work? I mean, would it be responsive and quick, and would it pass audit? Okay, well, what happens after you build it? Who's going to maintain it? Well, okay, putting it in, maybe you put it in, but it's going to cost the same amount of money, because the money is in the installation of it, in the migration. It's not the money in the software. And I can go through 7 arguments that were raised and go, check, check, check. We've knocked them down one at a time. So Koala, as we've matured, this foundation for open source software investment, we've come up with a tagline because it really drives to the heart of what this is about. Keep your money in your mission. Your mission is teaching and research. So let me blow through pretty quickly. I've talked about Koala, I've talked about open source. How does it really work? So here is the fast version, Koala 101, of what makes this thing work altogether. Well, first we have open source software licensing. So we have a fairly promiscuous software license. There are software producers. Northwest has been a software producer in Koala for quite some time. Indiana, Michigan State, and others. And then there's a much larger universe of software consumers, smaller institutions who don't want to write, they're just going to download and use it. And then the third piece is commercial support. Now, I can write some software at IU and I could give it to you. But the problem with that is you might call and ask me about it. So that's why it's good to have commercial firms out there who can pick up the open source software, and if someone needs implementation help or they need support or data migration, commercial firms can provide that service for them. We set out to create a different kind of ecosystem where the exchanges would not be based on large, voluminous contracts that held each other hostage, but on the open intellectual property and working together. Now, software is a lot of work to build, and some of you may know Eric Raymond's famous little book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. And he said software can be built by a big corporation that's very top-down driven in how things work. And then the other one is the messy one, the Bazaar. We wanted to have some, kind of top-down guidance of a project plan and a date and resources, but we wanted the openness of the software as well. So we came up with a new word, and that is community source. So we decided that community source was really much more like the pub between the cathedral and the bazaar. But the way a project comes about is essentially a few universities are saying, boy, we got the same problem about the same time, or we see that problem is coming our way. Would you like to solve it? Well, we need to solve it, and we've looked at our options. Why don't we get together and see if we can build this together? If you bring the gold, you make the rules. And so it's very important to know who is in as an investor, because then you get to decide some of what happens. We start building it, other investors come along, the functional people drive what's going to happen. It's not the techies. The technical people build it, and eventually it goes to being enhanced and maintained over time. What holds it all together? Because if the software is free, why doesn't everybody just run away with it? Well, because if you ran away with it, your prize would be you got to maintain it all by yourself and patch it and update it and deal with security matters. So we have this lightweight tension between the challenges of working with each other and coordinating to make it better, but knowing if y'all ever get crazy, we're leaving. We have the ability to walk out and do it. Now, with all of this software, 19 million in spend per year, 30 million in net assets, have you considered how large the staff is at the central office? 5 people. So why be a member? The colleges and universities do pay. In U.S. context, it's about $5,000 a year for small schools. In a place like Indiana, we're paying $25,000 a year. We're going to raise that up a little bit. In a $3 billion budget, we can find $25,000 for a membership in something that's creating this kind of value. And I've given up on updating this slide. How do you really make the collaboration work? It's easy to talk about collaboration, but a lot of people find they can't do it because when the going gets tough, our natural instinct is to retreat to independence. And so how do we really make it work? So a short little tale of dependence and interdependence. Perhaps someone is sitting there and they have a goal, something in their mind that they would like to be able to accomplish, an aspiration. So they go and they share this idea with others and say, I want to do this thing. And others come along and they go, yep, we're in. We want to do that thing as well. So they start working on that thing, but since there's more than one human involved, conflict arises. So one way to resolve conflict is simply by authority. My ball, my rules. And so we're going to do it my way. Now, you better have power and you need to have some tool. So if I own something, I may have authority over it. The other way of resolving conflict is by influence. Again, those of you who are married are probably familiar with this approach. Okay, so influence and persuasion. Some people carry outsized influence in being able to convince others to come with them. Business schools study this under the topic of leadership. So we believe there's a marketplace of ideas if we want to collaborate and become interdependent, but most of them fail. The reason they fail amongst universities is because we don't often get the architecture right of how we're going to work together to resolve conflicts. So we borrowed a term which is somewhat used poorly in other literature to call this the marketecture of community. It's the marketplace of ideas, the architecture of how to resolve conflicts, and how we pull together communities. So if I go to the marketplace and procure something, this is universities going solo. I go and buy a big contract from a big firm. I did it all by myself. I do not own that software. They do. And I have very modest influence with them. So one way we can enhance our influence is if we come together and amplify our voice. On this side, we can talk about owning software. And so this is traditional open source, Apache, Linux. And what that says is, yes, you own that software. It's yours. You can walk away with it. But you probably have very modest influence in changing that software. And the one that we're really thinking that is the winning spot for universities, this is great, by the way, for operating systems, for web servers, things at the lower level of the software stack. But where we need to change the software because the financial rules and reporting have changed from the federal government, or there's new tax implications or something, we need to be able to cause that to happen. And that's where the collaborative community of Koala comes in. So in the end, it's all about exchanges. So with that, I thank you.